we've been watching this. I've been following this for quite some time. I told you on spring break, I was in Turks and Caicos, was talking to all the locals there. They were livid over what was happening with Haiti and saying that they have been overrun, that the illegal immigrants coming in from Haiti are now exceeding the native population of just that island. And that's just one small island in the Caribbean. Other islands are being affected. And now the United States, we've seen a number of Haitian immigrants entering illegally from the southern border. And now they're looking at Florida. We were getting headlines about boats coming in to Florida, going into through the Keys from Haiti. And of course, then Florida Governor Ron DeSantis holds a press conference saying that's not going to happen. They're going to repel them. He joins us via Skype right now. Governor Ron DeSantis, we so appreciate you joining us, giving us some of your time. I always knew I grew up seeing boats coming in from Cuba, et cetera. This, though, everyone's being warned that this is something entirely different because of the complete breakdown of the government in Haiti. And you're sending law enforcement. You've sent officials down to the Keys to help. Tell us what you're expecting and what you've done so far.
Well, first, it's just important to point out this is the job of the federal government. And the Coast Guard actually does a good job, but they are way undermanned. Biden is not devoting enough resources. And so we've seen issues with this now going on for quite some time. So January of 2023, over a year ago, I did an executive order and we plussed up a lot of people to fill in the gaps. Since January of 2023, the state of Florida has interdicted 660 vessels and repelled over 13,000 illegal aliens. And that's just the state of Florida's vessels. The Coast Guard has been doing it as well. And so when the unrest in Haiti has gotten even worse, I did additional resources. So this is plussing up what we've already been doing, just basically telling, and it's important that when you show people that they will be interdicted and returned, the incentive for them to try the journey goes down dramatically, because this is not an easy trek on a vessel from Haiti all the way through. It's a lot. The Cuba trip isn't easy either, but that's 90 miles to the Keys. Haiti's a little more difficult. So I think we've put in place enough vessels to whatever gets through the Coast Guard we can do. Now, it's important legally, if you catch illegal aliens on the seas, sending them back is easy. Once they get into our country, then the federal government will give them a lot of rights. So, for example, they come across the southern border. I've had people down there from Florida that will intercept. The minute you turn them over to the Border Patrol, Biden just basically releases them into the interior of our country. That is not the way it works on the sea. So it's very important to interdict those vessels before they make landfall. And that's Florida or anywhere else. Look, Dana, as I got to defend my state, I've got enough issues just dealing with people fleeing from blue states moving into Florida. I'm building more we're building housing. We've got all this stuff. I can't be having people coming illegally from Haiti into Florida. And we announced last week that our Florida Fish and Wildlife actually recently intercepted a boat with 25 Haitians illegally trying to come to Florida. They had drugs and guns on their vessel.
And night vision.
Night vision. That's not exactly what you want to be happening in your state. So we're working hard. We've devoted an enormous amount of resources. And this is not our core task because the sea interdiction is really the federal government. But I'm not just going to sit there and complain. If there's a gap to be filled, we're doing it. So we've been doing this for quite some time. The last few weeks now is at the apex of the amount of resources we've done. But we think it's important.
It is incredibly important. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is joining us via Skype. And I'm glad you mentioned, too, the sort of legal difference there, because there's been a lot of discussion about this on social media. And I like to watch legal Twitter fight about it. But what you mentioned was incredibly important. Immediately meeting someone in the waters as opposed to once they make land. Because if you, as you were saying, you can interdict them in open water, but so as to the way I understand it, if they make land, then are you your hands are sort of tied like other border states that are landlocked by the federal government that won't do their job?
Well, here's the thing. I would be willing to send additional people to Texas to help. If they come over the border, I think the states should be able to just put them back over the border to Mexico. The problem when you get to a situation like Florida is if they have people in our state and we wanted to fly them, say, back to Haiti, You have to get clearance to be able to do that. If you wanted to fly somebody to a South American country, wherever they're from, it becomes a little bit more difficult because the federal government's going to tell the host countries not to accept our planes. So we've gone through these iterations. What could we do as states? I definitely think we can help put them back over the border if they come across in Texas or Arizona. And so I'd be willing to help do that. I think that the states really have no other choice to do that at that point. It's a little bit different for a maritime state like us. That's why we really have to get them before they reach the shores. And that's why we're working so hard to do that.
Yeah.
Although I will say this, we do have our transport program also that's going to be operational. So Haitians land in the Florida Keys, their next stop very well may be Martha's Vineyard.
I was just going to ask you about that, Governor. If you have any more excursions planned from the great state of Florida up to maybe Martha's Vineyard or maybe Maryland or maybe any of these other sanctuary cities or states that love to practice the virtue signaling of sanctuary, but they want Florida and Texas and everybody else to pay for it.
Well, hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I think that we're going to be ready. I also was proud just last week, I signed some additional legislation to build off the success we've already had with really making Florida now the #1 state combating illegal immigration. When I became governor, Dana, sanctuary cities weren't even banned in Florida. We banned sanctuary cities. We did mandatory E-Verify. We've got strong penalties for smuggling illegal aliens. And now what we did was we upped penalties. If you've previously been deported and you commit an offense in Florida, you're getting the book thrown at you. We also said people driving without a license. We're getting very serious about that. We don't issue driver's licenses to illegal aliens in Florida. We don't recognize out-of-state licenses that have been issued to illegal aliens. But we got to make sure that if they're coming to Florida, that's not a good place to be driving without a license. So we did that, which I think is very significant. And then finally, when we said no ID, some of the local governments a couple years ago were talking about issuing their own IDs to illegals, not driver's license, but IDs. Some NGOs were trying to do it. So we did legislation a couple years ago, said no. But what we've also now done is said, okay, you can't issue that in Florida, but if someone gets an NGO to issue them an ID in California or anything, you can't accept it either. So we've done, I think, a lot, more than any other state, to say, okay, if you're coming across the border illegally, that's wrong. Florida should not be a destination you're looking to because you don't have the benefits here. We're not rolling out the red carpet. To the contrary, you're much better off going to California or in Illinois.
Yeah, that's a great point. Talking with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, how many do you think since, and I'm going to move on because I want to ask you about all of the, I think that the parental rights bill has been a huge success considering how much the press has gone after it. But one last quick question on this. How many additional Haitian illegal aliens coming in just recently? Do you think that's increased by I keep reading conflicting reports on that, and I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have not actually seen a big uptick since all this started in Haiti. Okay. And I think the reason for that, Dana, is the best way to get into the United States from Haiti now is, as you mentioned earlier, through the southern border. If they can just get to Mexico, they know they're going to get in scot-free. If they got to get in a rickety vessel and try to travel all the way through the Florida Straits, that's a tough thing. That's very hazardous. It's more hazardous than coming across the border. So I think that's part of the reason we haven't seen. But then I also think because of the resources that we've dedicated, I do think the word on the street is out that you're likely going to get interdicted. So it's not really worth the risk to do. So we have not seen a huge increase or really much of an increase, if any. But if we do, we have more resources deployed than we've ever had in the history of Florida.
And what you were telling me too, Governor, about illegal aliens and the possession of driver's licenses, which Florida immediately nixed, and I thought it was interesting, especially considering U.S. District Court Judge Sharon Coleman, Northern District of Illinois. Basically, they upheld undocumented, or that's what they said, undocumented immigrants. Illegal aliens have the right to own guns. It was this firearm possession charge against one illegal alien who had a handgun in Chicago. This case now finally coming to bear. So in Illinois, sanctuary states like Illinois, they're giving people who are here illegally the right to have a firearm. And then you have those, I mean, just the story you were saying about the ones that you did that Florida Fish and Wildlife interdicted. They had guns and drugs and night vision. Florida's doing it very differently than these sanctuary states.
Well, just think the sanctuary states are also some of the most hostile states to law-abiding citizens owning and possessing firearms. So we're in a situation in this country that the political left, if you want to go to an airport, you have to show picture ID. They'll do basically an anal search of you just to get on the plane. Meanwhile, if you're here illegally, no ID. They just give you a sheet of paper. You just go do whatever you want. And then the flip side is if you wanted to conceal carry and say Chicago is a law-abiding citizen, they'd want to throw you in jail for that. But somehow a liberal judge is saying that illegal aliens somehow have to do this. They've just turned the world upside down in this country. And I think Americans are sick of being second class. It's bad enough to allow illegal immigration, but then to treat American citizens worse than you treat illegal aliens, it's just absurd.
I wanted to ask you one last thing. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis via Skype with us. The parental rights and education bill. I'm still amazed at the way that this is being, well, not amazed, I shouldn't be, misrepresented by the press because I've seen people now say, oh, well, we can say gay now. We can say, which you've all, I mean, I went to Florida and I yelled gay in the parking lot at the airport and nobody arrested me. So, I mean, it was okay. But this is hailed as such a success. I know activists were looking to block it. It was settled with the state last week. The legislation's still fully intact. That's a huge win for Florida and for your administration, Governor. And I just wanted to get your final thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. Look, we want our schools to educate, not indoctrinate. It's wrong to be jamming in things like transgenderism and gender ideology into our schools. It's just not appropriate. And we took that position. We had to defeat opposition from the 800-pound gorilla in Florida politics, Disney, which we did. And oh, by the way, Disney's suit against us has also been dismissed in the trial court level. And then you had last week where the court said the law is fully in effect. Some of the media were trying to spin that as somehow positive for them because they said, Florida has admitted that the word is not banned, but that was never it. So literally you had a false narrative that was created from the beginning. And then you have activists that are suing not on what the law actually says, but on the false narrative that was propagated by the media. The law's fully upheld. And basically the state has said, yeah, that's all a false narrative. That's not a victory for these activists. They were basically perpetuating a lie. So what we did respects the rights of parents. It's clearly appropriate to not have that stuff jammed into the curriculum. And we're better off as a result of that. And I can tell you, Dana, Florida is still leading the nation in migration. And part of it, yes, we had a big surge because of the COVID freedom versus some other states. Yes, law and order state, very important. But parents in some of these deep blue states, they say send their kids to school and it's pure indoctrination and they don't want that. So they know if they go to Florida, they've got a state government, certainly me as governor, but also our legislature that's fighting for them and for their kids. And I would point out, because I think this does tie into the indoctrination issue, we did paycheck protection for teacher union dues. So right now, Miami-Dade Teacher Union, third largest teacher union in the country, they have not gotten enough members to sign up, so they're on the brink of decertification. And the reason is because we empowered the rank and file to say, wait a minute, this union is pursuing a political agenda. They were the ones that fought me when I had schools open during COVID. They wanted it closed. They were doing protests, having coffins in front of the schools saying all the kids were going to die. It was totally absurd. That was almost 4 years ago that this was going on. They're the ones that want to hijack our schools to create a partisan political agenda. So parents' rights has been important, but I'd say also we're the only state that has actually beaten the teachers' unions all across the board. And that's what you're going to have to do. If you want to save the country, you can't let the left simply take over every institution in American life. And so it's been long thought that the left just has K-12. They can just do what they want with it. Not in Florida. We don't think the schools belong to the left at all, and we're fighting back.
And the proof is in the pudding there. America's governor, Ron DeSantis. I know so many people that, even from Texas, that have actually moved to Florida because they like the receipts and they like the wins. Beaten teachers unions, beaten Disney, beaten woke culture, beaten the federal government on illegal immigration, the whole 9 yards. Governor DeSantis, always a pleasure. Thank you for your fight, not just for leading Florida, but providing a blueprint for the rest of the country. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Of course.